Happy to welcome in our first guest this morning. The superintendent of the Oxford School District, Bradley Roberson, joins us. Full disclosure, I have known Bradley for a really long time. He and I, years and years ago, umpired together, Park Commission baseball, did some tournaments, so we've known each other for a long time, and there is no doubt that he has been outstanding for the Oxford School District. Bradley, there's so much for us to get into as we talk about the school choice conversation. We've tried to be a conduit for this conversation, for all the sides and all the opinions. You wrote an editorial that we published on SuperTalk.fm last week, and it started, "Few topics in education stir as much passion as school choice. On the surface, the idea sounds simple and appealing. Give families state dollars and let them decide where to send their children to school. But beneath that slogan are serious consequences for Mississippi's children, communities, and future consequences we cannot afford to ignore." Appreciate your time this morning. Let's start by, if you don't mind, expounding on that a little bit. The idea that this is a passionate topic, but that there are consequences to perhaps going down this road.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks, Richard. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share and visit with you this morning. You know, it is a passionate topic. The reason it's a passionate topic is because we're talking about our children, right? And there's nothing more important in any community, to any family, than our kids. We want the best for our kids. And the reason I went in to talk about the consequences of those choices really revolves around one idea, and this idea of whether or not public education or education is a public good versus a consumer good or a consumer project or a consumer topic itself. So let's dive into that just a little bit, because I think that really answers your question this morning. There's a quote that you hear often used in education. This is what it says. It says, "A community is only as strong as its public schools, and its public schools are only as strong as its community." You've probably heard that quote before. And the word public is explicitly stated in that quote. And why is that? That's because public schools educate everybody, right? There is no selective process in public schools. So education, for that very quote alone, is a public good. It's not a consumer product because it benefits everybody, right? If we take education and we turn it into a consumer product, we're really dividing opportunity, and it really weakens our system. You know, we already have a society that's about the haves and the have-nots. If we take education and we turn it into a consumer product, we've very greatly run the risk of dividing that gap in between the haves and have-nots even more. And that's not what's good for our community, Richard. Our community needs to educate everybody and educate them well.
You know, there are lots of advocates for school choice or educational freedom, as some people call it. And a lot of the people will bring points up where they say, I want what's best for my child. You know, the situation that they are in right now is not the best situation for them. And so I want the freedom, or I want the opportunity to choose what is best for my child. Is your argument that this is less about individual choice and more about the collective good?
Richard, that is 100% exactly what I'm saying. And look, parents absolutely deserve great options. But you know what? Real freedom, when you're talking about a community and we're talking about a state and a nation, real freedom is when every family has a great choice for their child, right? Which has a great public school choice for the child, high quality, accessible, and accountable. This is not about limiting choice. It's about making sure that every family has a high quality educational choice for their kid. Not just those who can afford tuition, not just those that, can make it through a selective admissions process, which is what the majority of private schools across our state and country do, right? The best way to expand choice is to raise the quality of every public school that is closest to families inside of their community. Look, and I'm not saying that that's not a real challenge, because it is. It is an incredible challenge. But we've come a long way, Richard. I mean, in a decade, from 50th to 16th, we're doing something right in public education in Mississippi. Why do we need to blow up the system now? That was one of the questions I asked in my editorial, right? When you think about improvement, right, you don't blow up a system that's working. You tweak the system, right, to try to continue those improvements at scale. Look, I'll use our Rebels for an example. I'm sure Coach Kippen was not excited about the score this past weekend. We didn't score enough points, right? I think he would tell you we left a lot of points on the table. But I assure you that when we go play Georgia this weekend, I bet we don't see 11 new offensive players, and I bet we don't see a whole brand new playbook. He'll tweak the system to make it better, right? He's not going to blow it up just because we didn't have as much success as he wanted this past weekend. And that's what I'm advocating for.
So you've talked a lot about the success over the last decade with that rise in scores and overall educational ranking in Mississippi. I've seen a number of legislators who were in office a decade ago that said, hey, a lot of the people that are arguing against this now, the idea of more choice or school choice or some form of school choice, are the same people that were arguing against some of the initiatives that we were trying to put in place a decade ago that has led to the success that we have seen and the growth that we've seen in public education in Mississippi. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Richard. Look, I think accountability is really, really important. And I think the third grade reading gate, which is how educators across our state and public schools know it, I think it was great legislation, right? But a lot of times we don't like accountability. And that was one of those instances early on. But look, I pat Governor Reeves on the back and all those legislators that passed the third grade reading gate because it has required public schools to step up to the plate. And I think it's a major reason that we have improved across our system. But at the same time, Richard, we can't tout that accountability was so important. And then it raised the educational outcomes of schools across our state. And at the exact same time, not hold private schools accountable inside the system. Now, I did hear, I went back and heard Speaker White's response to that question when you asked him about accountability for private schools. And I appreciate you asking him that question, Richard. And I believe his statement was something along the lines of there are accountability in private schools. It's whether or not parents are willing to pay the tuition for their kid to go there. Richard, I've been in education for over 25 years. I've never seen a metric to measure student outcomes based on whether or not a parent pays tuition, right? That's not an acceptable measurable outcome when we're talking about holding people accountable for public dollars. Like public dollars should require public results, right? And if we're going to give public dollars somewhere else, then there should be public results to show that. And just because a parent is willing to pay tuition is not public results.
So I think there are people that are hearing what you're saying and would say, well, that's easy to say when you're the superintendent of the Oxford School District or of DeSoto County schools or Madison County or some of the districts on the coast that are really excelling. The number of failing schools in Mississippi, D or F rated districts, is pretty small at this point. But if you look at maybe the C-rated districts that are across the street, I don't think there's anybody that's like standing on a mountaintop saying, man, these C-rated school districts are doing absolutely great. So for the parents of children in those districts, the opportunity to perhaps send their child to a district where things are going better or there is more excellence than maybe what they're experiencing. Are you okay with the idea of district to district transfer within the public system?
That's a great question too, Richard. And I will tell you, here's how I feel about that. I would sum that up by saying that is the least worst option, right? I am certainly more open to that possibility other than giving money to private schools when there's no accountability for results there. And that is a fair question because I do work in a great district, but I also work with a lot of those school districts that are struggling across the state. I've been inside those schools. Some of those superintendents are my good friends. And here's what I would say to that, Richard. Those guys are working really, really, really hard. Those teachers are working really, really, really hard. But let's be truthful about this. When you look, I gave you the quote at the beginning of our opening of our conversation. A community is only as strong as its public schools, and its public schools are only as strong as its community. Those communities, Richard, are dealing with so many things, adverse situations that fall well outside of educating a child. They're keeping their public schools from being successful, right? I mean, you got families that are working. Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there. We're up against a break. We'll continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Bradley Roberson, Superintendent of the Oxford School District, is my guest. We're back with you on Mornings with Richard Cross right after this. Good to be with you this morning. Mornings with Richard Cross, SuperTalk, Mississippi, presented by Community Bank, rooted in our community, communitybank.net. Bradley Roberson is my guest. He's the superintendent with the Oxford School District. We're talking about the school choice debate, the educational freedom conversation that certainly has been ongoing and is going to continue, we think, into this legislative session. It appears as if that's going to be a significant topic within the legislature this year. I had one elected official tell me that to some degree we already have school choice, in so much as most districts within the state do have transfer policies that are in place that allow students to enter their district if their current school district will release them. Is that in place in Oxford?
It is. And that's a pretty standard practice all across the state. The home school district has to release the student, and it takes a board vote. It's not a superintendent's decision or a principal's decision. It's a board decision to release a student. And then the incoming school board has to accept that student as well.
But are the outgoing districts willing to release students? I mean, if they've got a good student academically, athletically, socially, et cetera, are they willing to generally release that student?
Not very often does the release happen. Now, different boards have different feelings about that. Again, it's a local board decision of how they handle that situation. But we don't get just a ton of those that are coming into the Oxford School District. Most of the time when we receive those, it's around students with special needs who maybe are searching for other resources that we may be able to provide in the Oxford School District that other school districts can't.
Yeah. You're the quote that you went to a couple of times, talking about school districts being as strong as their community and communities being as strong as the school districts. I certainly concur with that. And, one of the things that I've talked about living in Oxford and graduating from the Oxford School District a long time ago, 26 years ago now, is that Oxford has always been incredibly supportive of public schools. And there are other districts within the state and other communities within the state, a bunch of them that have done the exact same thing. But what about those communities that aren't as supportive of public schools, that for whatever reason, whether it's resources or a general lack of concern, that they don't support public schools the way they need to be supported? Are we doing a disservice to those students if we are not allowing them to have the opportunity, if parents are able to help get their kids to school, not giving them the greater opportunity to be in a better district?
Yeah, again, Richard, I think it goes right back to that same conversation. The whole part of my op-ed article is this a public good or competitive market? There may be, individual instances to where that may make good sense. But in the long term, when you're thinking about the public good of our entire community and our entire state, it doesn't make sense. You and I could sit here and talk about things all day long that may be good for me as an individual and my family, but it may not be good for the Oxford community. So am I going to, jump on that boat and do what's just good for me and my family, or do I take my entire community into account with that? And that's just something we have to weigh as individuals, and something we have to weigh as, those that are leaders inside of our community. Is it about us, or is it about the greater good? There's always certain instances we could pick and choose all of those situations to where it may be better for one individual or the other.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier, I've known Bradley for a long time, and I've had a chance to watch him in this role as superintendent for a number of years now. And so I know, because I've seen it, he cares greatly, you care greatly about public education, not just in Oxford, but across the state of Mississippi. You talked about the success that Mississippi has had, and I had a colleague, mentor, business person who's been very, very successful in Mississippi that I had trouble kind of seeing the way he measured success, because I would see an achievement and he would say, yeah, but what's next? and was always pushing to the next thing as opposed to, just being proud of what had been accomplished. So when you look at the progress that Mississippi has made and recognize that there's more work still to do, as a public educator, as a superintendent in Mississippi schools, what's next in terms of pushing forward and not just being, oh, look at us, look how far we've come?
Yeah. Listen, I hope we don't have a single superintendent in the state of Mississippi that's sitting there in their seat this morning, patting themselves on the back for the accomplishments that we've had. Because if we do, they probably don't need to be leading our public schools any longer. Because status quo is not the answer. And if there's one thing you know about mine and your relationship over the last 20-something years, status quo is not even in my vocabulary. I don't believe in that. So the next steps for Oxford, DeSoto County, or any school that's struggling is, Richard, we already know what works, right? It's investing in early childhood education, right? It is making sure that we have well-prepared teachers and our schools have the resources that they need. We continue to scale those processes and all of those tools that we know what works over the last 10 years into our struggling systems. But here's the other thing we do. The Oxfords of the world, the Madisons of the world, the Clintons of the world, all of us that are being successful, we just can't sit by either. We have to continue to test small change ideas to refine our systems to continue to eliminate variance, right? Look, Richard, education is all about variance. The more variance that we can remove within our systems, the greater the outcomes are for all students in Mississippi. That's the idea. So even the Oxfords of the world can't sit by and just because we're being successful. We have to continue to remove those variances so that we can scale them to our friends in other parts of the state. That's other work that I do, Richard. You probably don't even know that. I work with a group called the National Center for School University Partnerships, where we get Mississippi districts together from all across the state. And we say, hey, man, let's talk about your system and what's working well. Let me talk about my system and what's working well. And what are small change ideas we can implement so that we can scale these changes all across our state. Yeah. So we're starting that work and working together to make sure that that happens.
Bradley Roberson, superintendent of the Oxford School District, just a few minutes left. There's a conversation that I think runs parallel to the school choice conversation, education freedom conversation, and it's about making the most of resources. There are a lot more districts in the state of Mississippi than there are counties in the state of Mississippi. District consolidation is a topic that always comes up and then seems to just kind of get pushed to the side and we keep moving along. Are you an advocate of consolidating districts within the state, within each county?
Look, I'm an advocate for doing whatever is the best to serve every kid across Mississippi. You know, if there are situations that you're talking about with consolidation, to where, you know, that we think that it benefits the students in that community, then yeah, I mean, I would advocate for that. But again, we can't be so short-sighted that we're not looking at the end goal. And the end goal is to providing the best high-quality education for every kid in our state. And whatever that takes to do that is what we need to do. If that's consolidation, then fine. But I'm also a guy that wants to understand and know the research of how that's going to impact students in a positive way. That's another thing with school choice. I mean, Richard, I haven't seen, if you look at the states that have done this in the last decade, I haven't seen to where there's positive student outcomes across these states. If we think moving a child that all of these other circumstances in life, whether it's a parent working 3 jobs or living in poverty, which is what you see in these communities, if we think just shifting them to another school or to a private school is going to change that circumstance and all of a sudden they're going to be overly successful, I mean, we're really missing it there, right? We have to deal with some of those other issues. Look, I hate to say it, but we have kids that come to the Oxford School District every day that learning, Richard, is not their top priority. But why is that? It's because of all of the other circumstances in life that are constantly beating them down. I tell our folks all of the time, the days of school systems just teaching math, English, science, and social studies are over. I mean, all of the ill wills of society fall on one place to fix. And you know where that place is, Richard? is public education. And if we don't fix them, they're not going to get fixed. That's just the reality of it right now, right? We have to step up to the plate and be able to accept that and be able to put things in place to make sure that happens for our communities.
Bradley Roberson, superintendent with the Oxford School District. If you want to read his editorial, you can do so on our website, supertalk.fm. It's right there and under the news tab. Certainly makes you think a lot. A lot of opinions on this topic. I appreciate, Bradley, you spending some time with us this morning and sharing your perspective.
Yes, sir, Richard. Thank you. It's good to talk with you.
You as well. We'll talk soon.
Bye, man.
Mornings of Richard Cross, Super Talk, Mississippi. Bradley Roberson, a huge proponent of public education and the role that public schools play, not just within the state of Mississippi, but within our individual communities. Good conversation there. We'll get to some of your messages on the C Spire text line, 601-879-4395. Right now, though, we'll take a timeout. It's Mornings with Richard Cross on Super Talk Mississippi. We're back with you right after this.